for the last 10 years, my colleague Peter Field and I have been mining this data to try and find out if there are any rules about what makes advertising work. And somewhat to our surprise, we have actually found some really strong, regular statistical rules about what works and what doesn't. But first of all, I'm going to try and summarize the whole of the last 10 years of research in two charts. The first one is, I think, a really important idea which I think a lot of people who work in marketing do not understand, which is that there are two very different ways in which marketing communications can make money for businesses. And they work in different ways, in different media, over different timescales. The one that perhaps those of us who work in TV advertising and those who work in advertising agencies feel most comfortable with is brand building. So brand building tends to work quite slowly. So if you have a series of, say, for example, brand building TV ads, and you run your TV ads, every week or every month or every year, what you see is that your base level of sales slowly rises over time. Because brand building is about creating long-term, durable, long-lasting memories and associations. It's about what goes on in people's heads. Because it's such a long-term thing, brand building means you need to talk to people long before they buy. And that means that you have to go quite broad, because you really need to talk to anyone who might buy the product in the next couple of years. And as you'll see later on, the core of brand building is emotional. The other approach is what we call sales activation, which is where you're focusing very much more narrowly on people who are going to buy the product in the very near future. Sales activation is highly targeted, and it's often more rational, more persuasive. It might include a direct response mechanism. It produces much bigger short-term effects, but it doesn't last as long. It decays more quickly. And as a result, the effects of activation don't build up so much over time. Now, when you look at the short term, and by the short term I mean anything less than 6 months, you conclude that sales activation produces the biggest effects. But actually, when you look at the long term, like 2 years or more, you realize that about 2/3 of the sales effects come from brand building. In fact, you need both working together, because each enhances the other. And a big part of our research has been about understanding how to get them to work together and to work in balance. Now, we came up with something called the 60-40 rule, which is basically that we found that if you look at the business effects, if you look at the effects on sales and profit and market share, the most effective campaigns tend to have a sort of 60-40 budget split, brand versus activation. So about 60% of the budget goes on brand building and about 40% on activation. So we discovered that rule back in 2012. And what we've been doing is looking at that rule over time, and it seems amazingly durable. So if you look at, for example, the UK market over the last 20 years, British advertisers have tended to split their budgets on average 60-40 every year for the last 20 years, despite all the changes in the media landscape. And the latest data that we've got for the last couple of years shows that this 60-40 split still seems to be optimal, even in today's new digital landscape. But what we are seeing is a lot of advertisers beginning to be seduced by short-termism, particularly in the digital space. The vogue for real-time evaluation is, I think, potentially quite dangerous, because it leads you to just focus on short-term metrics, clicks, web visits, likes, and so forth, and forget about long-term growth. What this chart shows you is that the core of business success is principally driven by brand building. It's brand building that drives long-term growth.